Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming back for episode two. And oh my gosh, episode two was quite the ride. I've already warned my blog readers. If you are the weepy kind, I typically do not cry when I watch Korean dramas, but if you are one of the weepy kind, you may want to have a box or two of Kleenex or tissue at hand because this episode it's hard to watch. Just it literally like just goes for the jugular, it rips your heart out, and we'll get into that soon. But anyway, I did want to let you know that I'm having a little bit of an internet issue. It's like really slow connectivity right now, so I'm gonna try to film while my blog post pictures and all that are uploading. I hope that it works. But anyway, let me go ahead and get started. Oh, and before I start, I want to thank those of you who have come to join me on this YouTube adventure from my blog. Thank you so much. I have, I think, yay, 7 subscribers. But anyway, I'm hoping that more of you will join me as I go through the Goo book, Goo family book series. And those of you who are finding me for the first time just through YouTube, I do have a blog, KoreanDramaReviews.com, or you can just Google Musings of a Twinkie and you'll find me there. Anyway, thanks for watching and let's get started, okay? Episode 2 picks up where episode 1 left off, where our Papa Kumio, I want to call him Papa Kumio, he is telling his friend that he really wants to become human and asks, how do I get a hold of this Goo family book, the thing that is supposed to have the secrets of how a Kumio can become a human being. And the guy says, don't do it. It's just gonna, as long as this woman's here, she's gonna cause trouble for you and, something horrible may happen. And he says, hey, this is the first time in 1,000 years that I have felt my heart beat like this. And I may not be able to find another person like this, for the next 1,000 years. And so basically he's telling his monk friend he's in it for the long haul and he's all in. Well, in the meantime, our little resident evil villain has commissioned one of the court's, best investigators and, I forget his name. I'm sorry. I had it and I was like, remember it, but I forgot. You guys know who I'm talking about, though, right? Anyway, he sends him on this manhunt and his troops find the burned out torch, and then the man ends up finding one of Soa's, I think it's the hairpin that she had. And so he knows he's on the right track, and they're starting to search. Well, in the meantime, back in Papa Kumio's house, or little residence, she comes to him and says, I know that you've been kind enough to save me, but as long as I'm here, you're in danger, and I need to keep moving on. And Papa Kumio says, no, it's okay. You need to stay here for your safety. I'll protect you as long as you're here. No one can get you, and all of that good stuff. And then he says, you must be hungry. So I brought you something. And then he holds up this bag, and when they go back inside, it's hilarious because he pulls out a little rabbit hair, like, a rabbit, and then I think it's a turtle or a bird. I can't remember what the other one was. I think you can see it in the picture, but anyway. He then says, which do you prefer, right? And she just kind of looks at him and she's like, I'll just take a peach. And then he's like, oh, hold on just a minute. And then he runs out and he climbs onto this peach, and you see this like little cute scene of him like frantically grabbing all the peaches he can into a big, huge bag. And then he dumps the bag in and says, here. And she just kind of looks at him. And he's like, you have to eat at least this much for you to become full, right? I mean, you can't just become full with just one little peach. And for the first time since her, I guess going into slavery and all of the, stuff that's happened, she cracks a smile for the first time, and he's just enchanted with her. He tries to do anything he can to get her to keep smiling. And so I think it's the next morning where she's out and she's just smelling a flower, and then you see this cute picture of him bringing this huge, like, I can't even call it a bouquet. It's literally a huge bundle of flowers. And, he just kind of grins at her. So, widely. And then when she sees a little butterfly, she thinks it's so pretty. And then the butterfly flies away and she follows it, and then she happens to catch, Woryong is the name of our little Papa Kumio, but he comes and he's got this bag, his little bag of tricks, I guess we can call it, and he opens it up, and there are all these butterflies that just come flying out, and she's just completely enchanted by just the way he's just showering her, and she asks him, why are you being so kind to me, right? But before she gets really kind of solemn, and then he doesn't want to see her get sad, and so he grabs her hand and he takes her on top of this little ledge, and she's then able to see this incredible, beautiful panoramic view of the mountainside and this beautiful lake, and she's just breath. She loses her breath, and she just tells him this is such an incredibly beautiful sight. And of course, he's not watching the scenery at all. He's just watching her, and he says, "You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," or something to that effect. So anyway, later that evening, over a little fire, she tells him her story, and how she was separated from her brother, and her servant is, back in the brothel, and she's actually taking her place. And then she asks, "What about you? Do you have any family?" And he kind of hedges and he says, "No, I'm all alone." She's like, "Oh, really? How long have you been alone?" And he said, "For a long time." And, he says, "For a long time that I've lost count." And I'm thinking, yeah, 1,000 years? Yeah, that would be a long time. So anyway, she wonders what has happened to her brother and her servant, and she feels as though she can't truly be happy or live comfortably until she finds out that they're okay, or what has happened to them. And so he promises to go and find out, and he does. And I'm looking at my notes, and as he goes back to town, he actually sees the body of her younger brother still hanging. And what had happened was, after their little bonfire scene, the camera spans back to our evil villain and the head courtesan. And the head courtesan is actually asking, "Can you please allow me to bring the body down for a proper burial?" And the evil villain says, "Why? Why do you have such a soft heart for him? Why are you trying to give him a proper burial? Is there something, did you have something going on with his father?" And of course she vehemently denies it. But the villain wants to keep the body up there hanging as a way to lure the sister out. Because he figures if it's still hanging, the sister will want to, rightly so, bury her younger brother and give him a proper burial. So he says, "Hey, we're gonna leave it up there for another span of time." I think he said like a week or two. I can't remember whether it's a month even. Who knows? I've forgotten the details. Sorry. But anyway, he insists on leaving it up there. And what's so funny is, while he's talking with her during that time, Papa Kumio goes, and sees the brother's body hanging. And so he takes it down and he gives it a proper burial with a little burial marker. And as the villain and the head courtesan are talking, a guard comes in and says, "The body's been taken down and we don't know where it's gone." And the irony of that whole scene is that the evil guy was, right before that moment saying to the head courtesan, "No one's going to take that, dead body down." Literally, in essence, saying, "Over my dead body will that body go," right? And very soon after, the guard comes in and says, "It's disappeared." So anyway, they're all in an uproar as to what could have happened. And then Papa Kumio goes back to tell Soa the news of what's happened to her brother and her servant. But he has a hard time even telling her the truth, because he doesn't want her heartbroken. So with a heavy heart, when he meets her and she says, "Have you heard news?" His face is very, very solemn, but he tells her that both brother and sister are safe and they have escaped. And the sister is so incredibly relieved. Soa is so incredibly relieved that without any thought, she, reaches up to hug Woryong, and he kind of like freezes and he's like stunned, right? And she thanks him And then after she thanks him, she realizes, oh my gosh, I'm hugging a man. And so she backs away very quickly. And when she does, he kind of holds her cheek like this, and he just kind of caresses her. He doesn't caress it, but he just kind of holds her cheek, and he just looks at her, right? And then he walks quickly away before, things can get awkward, and she just watches him walk away, kind of stunned by the turn of events. But of course, Papa Kumio then turns back, and then he kisses her. And so I was thinking to myself, wow, this is very fast pacing. Things are moving very quickly. Well, what happens then is when he comes back and he kisses her, he asks her, "Will you marry me?" And she just kind of looks at him stunned, and she says, "I'm the daughter of a man accused of treason and someone who was wrongly executed, but I'm that daughter." And he's like, "Yeah, will you still marry me? Will you marry me?" He doesn't say still. He just says, "Will you marry me?" And then she just looks at him, and then she says, "I'm a runaway slave, and if I'm caught, then I'm dead. And by linking yourself to me, you could be in trouble." And he's like, "I know. Will you marry me?" And it's so cute, his earnestness and just his single focus. And so at that point, she kind of realizes, oh my gosh, this man is willing to overlook my past, my background. And so she embraces him and says yes. She doesn't say it, but you pretty much get the idea that she does. So afterwards, what happens is, let me consult my notes. Yeah. So Woryong goes to see his little monk friend, and he wants to know how he can find this Gu family book because he wants to figure out how to become human. And so the monk's like, "Oh, I don't know. We'll have to see it. The book is somewhere in my library, I think." And so they go, or at least finding like information about the book is in his library. So they go tromping down, and oh my gosh, those of you who know, I love libraries, right? Those of you who saw my recent post about the library, this is an incredibly beautiful library. So all of you, bibliophiles, be prepared to just be enamored with the monk's library. But anyway, they go down, and it's hilarious because this is where I think some of the comedy gets infused. Because I was kind of afraid looking at the previews for the next few episodes that Singi's character and Susie's character were going to get all the fun, light comedic role, parts, and it looks like our Papa Kumio and Sela got a little bit of comedy before the whole tragedy hits. But anyway, so they go down to the library, and as they're going down, he's like, "Oh, it's here somewhere," and Woryong's like, "Hey, if the book is about me, shouldn't you have kept it in a better place?" And the monk is like, "Well, I didn't think we'd ever need it. I mean, I didn't think that you would want to become human ever." And so he's looking around, and he says, the monk friend is saying, "Why would you want to be, human anyway?" And the guy, Papa Kumio says, "Because I finally found a woman who has made my heart beat for the first time in 1,000 years, and I don't want to lose her because I don't know if I'm going to ever find another woman like this in the next 1,000 years, right?" And so he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to do everything I can to hold on to her." And so the monk friend, he's so hilarious. He turns and he's like, "Why would you want to do that? That's so..." He's like, "Don't you know that the one thing that man just cannot understand and has, that gives him grief is the human woman?" He's like, "Why would you want to become a human man to have to deal with the human woman?" And it's just really cute. But anyway, as he's ranting and raving about how that's one of the reasons why he, no longer has a wife or, whatever, Woryong says, "Hey, isn't this the book?" He's like, "I think I found something." And then the monk's friend's like, "Oh, yeah, that's it." And then he reluctantly reads it. And he says, "Oh, it says here that it's really difficult." And he's like, "Okay, well, let's hear it." And it turns out that there are 3 stipulations for Kumio to try to become human. And that is number 1, it's hilarious, for 100 years, he needs to not eat any meat. Okay, and there's a picture of him like, grabbing a little hair, and he's about to eat it, and he's like, "Oh, wait, I have to stop." And so he puts it down, right? Stipulation number 2 is that If a human being asks for his help, no matter what he wants to do, he has to help that human being. And so what's funny is this very foolish human hunter is strung upside down right by the little hare, and he's like, "Help me, help me!" So Boryong goes there and he releases him, right? So that was stipulation 2, to help any human being who asks for help. Stipulation number 3, though, is that no matter what the circumstances are, he cannot show his true self at all to the human being, right? So it's hilarious because that same hunter then, when he, writes himself up, he gets all mad. He's like, "What did you do with the hare? Did you let my prey loose?" And, he's like freaking out, and like you see Wodong, like his eyes glowing and trying to calm down, saying it's like 100 days, 100 days, right? So he looks at his monk friend. He's like, 100 days? It must be really hard, right? That's why it's never been done before. He's like, but for the sake of Sawa, I will try, right? And he's like, "I'll see you in 100 years. 100 days," and then he walks away, right? But his monk friend stops him before he does, and he tells him, "Hey, if you are unsuccessful and somehow, you die or whatnot, then the reverse curse is that for 1,000 years he will roam as a curse then, or as a, bad spirit or something like that." And so he's like, "Okay, that's something that I'm willing to take." And he's like, "See you in 100 days. And he leaves. And so when we go back to Hoa, we see her and Papa Kumio actually having their wedding ceremony. It's really pretty, very simple. One of the typical, what we would call common law marriages, where it's just the two of them, and he put like a little wreath of flowers over her head, and then they have their wedding night. Well, they, the evil villain actually locates while the wedding is going on, and the wedding night, and it's really sweet because Woryong sees the on her right shoulder the prostitute mark, and so he tenderly kisses it, and they have their wedding night. But anyway, so the evil guy, he hears that there's been a marker located of the dead, brother, and so he goes and he sees this marker, and I guess it's a similar marker to someone who had been, like a professor who had been buried previously, and so he now suspects that the sister is very well alive, and he's left wondering. He plucks the little grave marker and takes it back with him, and he's left wondering how the sister was able to do that alone, because, he says she is, weak and frail. How would a frail woman be able to drag her, heavy brother's dead body so deep into the forest? And he suspects now that she has an accomplice or someone who's helping her. And so he tells the investigator, I think his name was a Champyong something, I can't remember, but anyway, he has him search the mountainside, right? For 2 months now. 2 months have passed for the most part, and actually it's been more than 2 months. I would say about 90 days, so about 3 months have passed. And we see Sawa come out of their little cave as Woryong is about to go off and go do some more work, gathering woods and what have you. And she stops him and she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go get some herbs, and here's your lunch." And she packs him like a little push it up box for him to eat. And he tells her, "Please stay. No, it's not safe for you to go alone. Let's go when I come back." And she says, "Oh no, I know the mountainside like the back of my hand now, and I'll be safe. Don't worry." And as soon as she said that, I thought, "Oh, are you kidding me?" No, right? You guys know too, right? So anyway, what's really cute though is he tries to take the basket of that for her herbs away from her, and she's so cute. She takes it away, and then he tries to grab it, so she takes it away again, and she says, "Don't worry, I'll be fine, husband." And it's so cute how she calls himself Angin, right? But anyway, when he looks like he's gonna continue to just not let her go, she reaches up and gives him a quick peck on the cheek, which is so cute because you would think that after 3 months of marriage that he would be okay with any, skinship or whatnot, but he's just stunned. And then she gives him another quick peck on the cheek again, and then she goes off to gather her herbs and, vegetables, right? And he's just left there literally. The picture is like this. And as he's doing that, his little monk friend comes and he's like, "Oh, you've been struck dumb by the love of your wife, your new wife, huh?" And then they start talking, and he says, the monk says, "So how long has it been?" And the guy says, "Oh, it's been about 3 months. I have 11 days left now of this, and then I'll be able to become human." And so he's like, "Wow, that's impressive." And he says, "But then again, I suppose that if you want to have the love of this beautiful wife, then of course this is nothing, right? This type of suffering, you should to be able to have such a pride as her." And he's like, "Look, she even packs you this great lunch." And then he opens the lunch and he's about to eat it. And as soon as he grabs one to eat, Woryung's face is like, "Oh, don't eat it." And then of course the monk eats it and spits it out. He's like, "Oh my gosh, have you been eating this for the past 90 days? And he's like, "Yeah, my wife, her cooking skills aren't that great." And so he's like, "Oh my gosh, the fact that you haven't eaten any meat, that's impressive." Anyway, the monk tells him though, that he has done more research and that once he completes the 100 days, the book will kind of magically appear for Woryung to, figure out how to become human again. And then he gives him this, it looks like a wooden sword, and he gives him the sword and he says, "Look, in the event of the worst case scenario, keep this on your person and don't ever forget. You have to use this if worst case scenario happens in order to prevent yourself from becoming, an evil spirit or, having to deal with a curse for 1,000 years." And it turns out that if he dies without really having the true love and acceptance from Sawa, that's what's going to happen. And so he's like, okay, he doesn't think it's gonna, be an issue, but he tucks it away into his breast pocket, and then he goes off to do his stuff. Well, in the meantime, then we've spanned back to our little evil resident guy and his investigator, and the investigator literally just tells him, "It's been 3 months. I'm not going to investigate this any further. I refuse to use," because he's a court-appointed investigator. He's like, "I refuse to continue a fruitless investigation at your whim for your personal vendetta or for your personal interest," right? And so he's like, "I'm gone. I'm done." And then he's about to get up and leave, and a servant comes, one of the guards, and he says, "We just received word that the woman has been located." And I'm just like, of course, out while she's gathering vegetables, right? But anyway, the investigator kind of looks back, and that he doesn't want to pursue this matter any further, but now he is obligated to go and find out. So he and his guards go, and Sawa figures out very quickly that she senses that someone's watching her, and so she starts to quickly run away. And at the first sign that she's caught on, the guard who was trailing her releases into the sky what looks like the equivalent of a flare. And the investigator and his troops who have now arrived on the scene see the flare, and then they spread out, getting ready to kind of corner her in. Well, meanwhile, Woryung has returned home, and he's like, "Sawa, where are you? Sawa, where are you?" And he's looking for her, and he gets this really, bad feeling, and he looks up into the sky. He sees the flare, and he's like, "Oh my gosh!" And he takes off running for the flare, right? And so what then? The next few minutes, what happens is Sawa is running away, and she hides, but she is able to evade the notice of the guard who's following her. But what happens is that she gets spotted by the rest of the guards who have then, arrived on the scene, and she runs, and as she's running, you hear her internally crying out for Woryung, saying, "Help me, help me." And of course, just like magic, he's right there. He hugs her, and then they disappear. Right? And when the troops have passed, and Woryung thinks that it's safe, he reappears and he takes Sawa by the hand. He's like, "Let's go home quickly," right? But of course, wouldn't you have it, the head investigator, our little, super sleuth, he is on horseback, and he was watching for them, right? he did not move away. And so, he confronts him and he's like, it's interesting. You have this very interesting gift of disappearing and blending in with the scenery. He's like, what are you? And he tells Woryung that, because Woryung says, what have we done? We're just two people, man and wife, who are just, trying to live peacefully and go about our business. And the investigator says, well, if that's really the case, then my apologies. But if the woman that you have hiding behind your back is actually, the daughter of a treason, a man accused of treason, and she is also a runaway slave, then, I have every right to do this, right? And so Woryung remembers his promise of not using his magic in front of human beings. And he's just thinking, 11 days, 11 days. And he certainly doesn't want to morph in front of Soa. So he looks the horse that the investigator's on in the eye, and he causes the horse to spook. And so as the investigator's trying to get the horse under control, Woryung and Soa take off. And honestly, there's only so much running that they can do, especially when the girl is not designed or trained to run, right? And so she tells him, I can't run anymore, I can't run anymore. And he tells her, just hold on, I'll protect you as long as I'm here. No one will get you. And then he gives her a quick kiss, and then they continue to run. Well, unbeknownst to him, what happens is the investigator, shoots out another flare, which then tells his second in command to get into position. And so the second in command has his, troops get, assume position, and just as they're in position, who would run into, his line of vision, but Woryung and Soa. And literally he takes a bow and arrow and he's, and he lets it loose. And, thank goodness for Woryung's or Papa Kumyo's quick reflexes. He's able to dodge evade the arrow, hold her safe. But unfortunately, he's now then in a situation where the troops bind him, chain and rope. And you see him literally just cornered all around or encircled, right? And even though he's encircled, when they try to take Soa from him, he's still fighting and, pushing and shoving the guards aside. And he gets Soa, behind him, right? And he says, leave us alone. Do not touch my woman. And of course, he's outnumbered, as long as he can't use his Kumyo powers. And so they literally rip Soa away, and they're dragging him away, and dragging her away, and she's crying out, Woryung. And he's being beaten and pummeled by the remaining guards who hold him. He's got blood kind of coming out of his mouth. And at that point, as she's being, dragged away, he just can't handle it anymore. And he says, do not touch my woman. And then he morphs into his Kumyo. And he literally, the graphics is incredible. The action or the live fire sequence. They pull the guards away from him. The little fireflies appear, and then, they are propelled outward. And then he grabs one of the servants, and he basically ends up killing, I think, one or two of the servants, or not the servants, but the troops. And literally, he is in Kumyo form, so his hair has changed white. He looks very feral. And when Soa sees that, her just look of shock, right? Especially as he roars. And he sends like leaves and huge sounds spiraling through the forest. And so all of the troops literally are forced onto their knees just because of the sheer power of the wind and the sound of his growl or howl, and they faint pretty much, or they lose consciousness. Well, Soa's the last one standing, and she is just looking at all of this in horror. And at the very end, she keeps saying, no, it's not true. No, it can't be. It can't be. And as he comes closer to her, now that everyone has been taken care of, and he just says, Soa, Soa. And she's like, no, it can't be true. And then she just faints, right? And the scene is just everyone around him unconscious, and he is just howling in anguish because he now knows that, you know, the next few, moments with her are going to be very painful, and he doesn't know how she's going to react, obviously, right? So he carries her back to their cave or their home, and he spits up blood because literally he is like very close to dying, and so his Kumio body really needs to be repaired. And but despite that, he still holds on because he wants to make sure Sawa is okay. And she wakes up very quickly, and when she sees him, she backs away in fear, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, who are you?" And he said, "I'm so sorry. I'm loyal. I'm your husband." And she's like, "No, it can't be. It can't be." And she's just freaked out, and so he can't do anything because he no longer has any more strength, and so he collapses onto the floor, and she runs out, stumbles out of the cave, saying, "No, it can't be, it can't be." And she's like, "What's going on?" and things like that. And so literally you see Woryong literally, Papa Kumyo on the ground, just unconscious, while his wife, who can't accept the reality of what's happened, stumble. And it's so frustrating for me. I wish there were, a heroine who could actually think. And I know that she's a noble woman who hasn't been trained, who hasn't had to deal with a lot of hardship, but it just drives me nuts that she can't see beyond his, background, because he obviously was able to see behind, beyond her background. But let's just say she's in shock. So, in shock, she stumbles back to the base camp of the troops, and she literally surrenders. Because at that point, the evil guy shows up and he tells him, "I want you to kill the Kumyo, and when you kill the Kumyo, I want you to kill the girl too," right? And so, um, just as they're saying that, she comes stumbling into their base camp, and she's on her knees, and the next thing you know, the evil guy slaps her and, then proceeds to tell her the truth. Number one, her brother and servant are dead. And I think that's it. Number one and two, brother and servant are dead. I shouldn't laugh, I'm sorry. But anyway, so, yeah. And she is just in shock because she doesn't realize, because Woryong had told her that they were okay. And he's like, "No." He's like, "They're not. And I made sure of it because I was the one who hung your brother," right? And she then gets really nauseous, and she goes and pukes. And so when she throws up, a part of me thinks, "Oh yeah, she's pregnant." Of course, right? Anyway, back at the cave, our monk friend comes, and he's looking for Woryong, and he sees him, obviously. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on? I knew something bad was going to happen." And even in his very weakened state, Woryong says to him, "Can you please find Saw? She must be so frightened right now. Can you please find her and make sure she's okay?" And I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, she just does not deserve him." But anyway, the monk agrees, and Woryong then, loses consciousness again, and he sleeps and, repairs himself. So, back at the base camp of the troops, she's throwing up, and she is crying as she realizes that her brother and sister have died, and partly because of her. That she wasn't able to protect them and all of this stuff. And the investigator sees her in her pain, doubled over, and you see him thinking. And I'm thinking that even though he is doing the bidding of this evil guy, that he's actually a really decent guy who will do right by her and save her. Anyhow, so the next morning, Woryong wakes up finally after being repaired, and he goes out to drink a little bit of water from, his stream, and he looks up, he gets up, he turns around, and literally the entire stream is lined with soldiers, and he is just stunned. He's like, how did you find this place? No human being can find this place. And then he sees Hawa, and he realizes that she led them to his home, and to their, home, and invaded his, for all intended purposes, his safe haven, right? And the look on her face, it's just so, if you guys hate her, I would not blame you at that moment, because she just looks at him, and instead of realizing that he's done everything in his power to protect her and to love her, she tells him, why did you lie to me? Why did you trick me? Because he says, how could you have done this, right? How could you have betrayed me and brought these men here? And her response is, how could you have betrayed me and lied to me about my brother and my servant? How could you have lied to me about who you are? And, how could you have lied to me and, made me think that you were a human man? And so she basically tells him, everything you've told me, everything that we've gone through, I no longer trust. I think it's all a lie. And he just looks at her and just tears in his eyes. He says, I love you, right? And as he realizes then what's going to happen, he reaches into his breast pocket. He pulls out the wooden knife, because he knows that if he does not kill Salah, he will then be punished for 1,000 years as this, under this, and he'll have to live 1,000 years under this curse. And so he, like, literally kind of flies over these troops, and he reaches Salah, and we don't actually know if he intends on killing her, stabbing her through the heart. We're led to believe that, but if he had actually intended it, you would think that he would have grabbed her and then plunged the stake into her heart very quickly. But all you see is him holding her shoulder like this, and, his hand, just down on the side. So you have to wonder if there was some hesitancy on his part. But regardless, we don't know, because as he reaches her side, our, super investigator plunges his long sword into Papakumio's stomach. And both of them are just stunned. Salah sees him as her husband, because he hasn't morphed into Kumio form again. And a part of her is just stunned by seeing him, pierced through the stomach like that. And, he just, even though he is in pain and is, probably going to die soon, the only thing he can tell her is, why I loved you. I truly, truly loved you, right? And then the investigator plunges the sword a little bit deeper into, almost to the hilt. And then you see Papakumio not even attempt to stab her in the heart. He just accepts that he can't kill the woman he loves. And so when the investigator takes the thing, his sword out and slashes across, ultimately killing him, or so we think, Orion gets propelled back, and then all his little Kumio firefly, energy starts to run around his body, and then he disappears, and then that's it. The Kumio, like, firefly spirit thing flies away. So anyhow, at that point then, she collapses and is left wondering, what have I done? What's going on? And the evil resident, our resident evil guy, he looks to the investigator and says, good job, we got rid of the Kumio. I'm gonna leave, finish the rest of the job. And he takes off. And, in some ways I'm glad he did, because it allows the investigator then to do what he will. But, at the same time, I'm thinking, if you want her dead, why did you not stick around? Perhaps because you liked her, I don't know, who knows. But anyway, he leaves, and as soon as he leaves, the monk friend is like, oh my gosh, where's my friend Wodong? And he comes back, right? And he sees the troops, and he realizes, oh my god, something's gone deadly wrong. And he's like, where is my friend Wodong, right? He's like, all he wanted to do was become human. He had, undergone this thing for 90 days. All he needed really was like 11 more days. So technically it's 89. But he's like, all he needed was 11 more days to become human. He's like, he only wanted to be a human husband for you. And, he's just beside himself, and he's just wailing, right? And she's listening to all this, wondering, what the heck is going on? What have I done? And at that point, she gets nauseous again, and she runs away to go throw up. Well, the investigator follows her and sees her throw up, and she puts her hand on her stomach, and she's like, oh no, 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 it's not possible, no, no, no. because as far as she's still concerned, Woryong is a monster, and she doesn't want to give birth to a monster. And some of us are thinking, oh my gosh, she's so stupid, or, very unfaithful to him. But one of the things we have to remember is that Korean culture back then, um, it was very, it was one that was marked with a lot of superstition and so kumios and things like that. That belief or that myth or legend, folklore, whatever you would call it, was very much a part of her, upbringing in a sense. I don't know. So, when she thought that she was impregnated by Woryong, her mind was, oh my gosh, I'm going to give birth to a monster, a kumyo, right? Or I don't even know if she realized she was a kumyo. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, so she looks back and she tells the investigator, she's like, no, it can't be. No, 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 it's not. It's not. And you just see him look at her. And the next thing you see is the evil guy looking at this bloodied hairpin, saying that, with the message that the investigator has sent this as proof that the second part of his mission was successfully carried out. And what sucks is that as the evil guy is looking at the hairpin, he flashes back to the time when he saw Seola, when he and her father were still friends, and Seola was still a maiden, and she's laughing, with no care in the world, innocent. And the look that he has when he looks at her is one of enchantment or whatnot, right? And I know it's supposed to be this kind of nostalgic moment, but personally I was grossed out because in my mind I just kept thinking, pedophile, 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 you evil, evil man. But anyway, so he just looks at it and, for a slight second he's like, so she's gone, right? And then he moves on. Well, what we find is that the investigator obviously has saved her, and he kind of reminds me of Snow White. In the story Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, how the huntsman saves Snow White and disobeys the queen's, orders. Well, the investigator saves her, and he actually sends her to the brothel house. And so the next thing we see is her throwing down, or a bowl of poison being thrown down to the floor, and the head courtesan is saying, what are you doing? And she's being held back by 3 women, and she's saying, please, please let me kill myself, or let me kill this baby. And the head courtesan just tells her, accept your lot in life. Obviously you've tried eating poison to get rid of this baby. You have tried to jump from a high story, from a high height to get, to have a miscarriage, and this baby is still alive and thriving. So accept it. Unless you die, this baby will live, right? And when she said that, I was just stunned by the sheer extreme that this girl had gone to try to get rid of, the only thing she really has left of Woryong, right? But anyway, she just does not want to give birth to what she thinks will be a monster. And so she escapes from the house, and she makes her way back to Papa Kumyo's safe haven, where of course there's no one there. And what's interesting is during that time, though, we find Woryong's body somewhere in the forest, and you see these kind of ivy growing over him and covering him. So I don't know. To me, it makes it seem as though it's not going to be a 1,000-year curse, but that perhaps somehow either there was a misinterpretation of the consequences, or that perhaps because there was some sort of love, or maybe his was a true love for her or something, that he's not going to be placed under this 1,000-year curse. That's what I'm hoping. Right? But anyway, he gets covered, and then, time flows, 9 months later, and then, we see Seola in the courtesan house. Well, anyway, she makes her way back to the Kumyo safe haven, and we, excuse me, we then see her giving birth, and as she is painfully giving birth, we see her painful labor being interspersed with moments that she had with William. It's just so heartbreaking because she's remembering all of the love words that he had given her, all of the kind acts, and just all the romantic gestures that he had, showered upon her. And she finally gives birth, and what is so heartbreaking, well, let me first say, when she does give birth and the baby goes, baby cry, it's the coolest thing. The fireflies start roaming again and cover the safe haven, and the monk who is in his library studying with a big sigh, of course, because he still can't get over his friend's death. He sees the fireflies too, and he wonders, oh my gosh, William, are you alive? Right? And so we go back to the cave, and it's so sad because she has just basically taken the time to wrap him up, the baby, and then she took some time to kind of rest, and she unwraps this thing that she had carried with her, which at first I thought had been the little wooden stick that William had to kill her with, but it turns out it's like literally, I forget the word for it. It's like a scythe, or like a hoe, but it's like a curved kind of sharp sword kind of thing, or a blade, or what have you. And I think they use it to hack away at like sheets of wheat, right? But anyway, she gets ready to literally kill the baby, and she says, "Forgive me, but I can't let this live," right? And the thing was, the cave at that point had been kind of shrouded in darkness, or at least the baby had been shrouded in darkness. And as she gets ready to strike the baby dead, the moon, the clouds that were covering the moon part, and then you have all this moonlight shining into this little pool. And she sees the baby for the first time. And she realizes, she's like, oh my gosh, you're not a monster. You weren't a monster. And the way she says it in Korean, I can't tell, because she said, "Kemuri 아니었구나." I think was the phrasing. I can't remember specifically. But I just remember thinking while I was watching it that I couldn't tell if she was saying that the baby isn't a monster, or as she's saying it, also that Woryong wasn't a monster as well, and just crying. But regardless, the good news is baby is safe and sound. And the next thing we see then is, oh, and by the way, when she realizes that, she just cries, and the scene ends with her just crying before the baby, right? Well, the next scene, and the final scene, really is of this Tegam, and he is by this little stream, and he has his friends and some, courtesans, waiting on him, and I guess they're celebrating his birthday. I don't know. I didn't quite catch it. Nor did I really care to when I was trying to quickly finish the screen capping and the recapping. But anyway, as they're talking, he hears this baby's cry, and he's like, "Is that a baby's cry I hear?" And his, right hand guy's like, "No, I don't hear it. Why would there be a baby in the middle of the mountainside like this?" He's like, "No, I think there's a baby's cry. And so he has the courtesan stop the music so that he can listen again. And literally, yeah, there is a baby. And then he realizes that there's a baby like floating by the stream. And so without any thought of his fine clothes or whatever, he wades into the stream and takes the bassinet or basket. And he carries it out. And as he does, the monk friend comes and he says, "You have received such a blessing. If you choose to keep this baby and raise it as your own, then this baby will bring you good fortune," right? And he looks at the nobleman directly and he's like, "Will you keep it and enjoy this fortune?" And at those words, because the guy says, "Well, I've roamed about a lot." The friend said, "I've roamed about a lot and such, and this, I know quite a bit, and this event right here, this baby's going to bring you good fortune," right? And so this man's just kind of like, "What? Really?" And his friends say, "Oh my gosh, yeah, raise it as your own, and since we'll even help you name it, since we found him in the river, you can call him Kangchi, right?" And so he's like, "Yeah, and you can give him your last name, so he'll be, Che Gangchi." And so the guy's like, oh, then I will name you Chachi. And the episode ends with him looking down at the baby, um, and then smiling as he realizes that he has a son now. So I'm hoping, of course, no Isungi or Susie even up until episode 2, but I'm hoping that things start well. And of course, the episode ends with a kind of a freeze frame on the new father's face, and then the narrator. Because I like how the episode starts and ends with a narrator, and how the narrator ends saying, although the story of this little boy's parents have ended tragically, um, the beginning of this little boy is just starting, right? And it leaves us with a very hopeful anticipation for episode 3. I will say though, it was really hard to watch. So for those of you who are, weepers, or you just can't stand the violence or whatnot, brace yourself before you watch this. It will go for your jugular, tear your heart out, and there's a lot of things here. But I'm already at, oh my gosh, 50 minutes. I better stop and try to upload this, right? So all right, hopefully this was a recap worth watching. I can't believe I've talked for over an hour, right? Uh, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm so sorry it's long. Like I said though, this episode, I mean, the writer is just doing such a great job of tightly packing in everything. I can't believe all of this happened in one episode. So, all right, I will sign off. If you guys have been able to survive through this, I will see you next Monday. So take care, everyone. Bye.